We approve the minutes as read.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as read. All in favor? Aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Our first item on tonight's agenda is a public hearing item on application number SUP 16-2 filed by India Brailsford, requesting a special use permit for a seasonal open-air market or farmer's market. This is at I guess we don't actually have, yeah, we do. 605 East Crawford Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The location here is the site of the Smoky Hill Education Center, which is located at the northeast corner of Crawford and Front Street. This property is the former Ashton's grocery store and is therefore zoned C3 shopping center district, which means that it is a suitably zoned location for a farmer's market. The plan here is to add another niche to our collection of farmers markets and open air markets. This would be a plan to be a Wednesday farmers market, and the plan is with permission of the education center to set up and operate a market that would sell on Wednesdays through the end of the growing season or into October. We did have contact with the applicant back in May. It was their desire to set up an individual open air market at that location, which we approved administratively, but that is subject to 14 selling days through an administrative temporary use permit. So this application is coming to you to allow this to be done on a full seasonal basis. And so the area that's available here is 154 feet by 130 feet, and there is more parking there than what is required for the needs of the Smoky Hill Education Center. And given the hours and time of the operation, there would not be a conflict or competition for parking spaces. So the idea is to have a Wednesday farmers market to allow consumers to have an opportunity to purchase fresh farm products and homemade craft items. There may be some overlap with those that sell at the Saturday farmers market. And again, the idea is that this is a one evening a week setup. And so the plan would be to sell from 4 to 7 on July 20th through October 26th. If the request is approved, the location that is, and if they so desire, they can come back next year and renew this administratively. What you're doing is looking at the suitability of this site for a farmer's market. And so we have 55 total off-street parking spaces. The market will displace 27 of those, leaving 28 available for use. I think we'd agree that this is a visible location on a well-accessible site. The primary access would be from either Front Street or Crawford. And the plan is to operate this similarly to the other markets, to rope off an area for vendors. The initial plan would be to have up to 12 vendors, but if successful, they can go beyond that. There is sufficient room. The market operator, as we understand it, and we'll need to clarify that, is that Ms. Brailsford is no longer involved in the as a responsible party for operation of the farmers market. It would be Mr. Ratzlaff would be overseeing that, but that would be subject to confirmation. And so the property owner has granted permission. There is liability insurance for the site. Little Caesars has granted permission to access restrooms. So we think that this meets similar criteria to the locations that you've looked at earlier this year, and it would be our recommendation that this application be approved. subject to a limitation on 12 individual vendors on any given day, that we be authorized as a staff to work with them to expand if there is such a need, that the display areas be clearly identified, and that driveways not be blocked, that they be left open to allow easy access in and out of the site. They would be allowed to have a sign up to 10 square feet that they would set up at the time the market is in operation. We have our standard condition about amplified sound, and the idea is that the site would be cleaned up and restored back at the conclusion of each market event. And as we noted, if you approve this as a suitable location, then if they wish to reestablish this next year, that would be an administrative process because you've already found the site to be suitable. So with that, I'd be open to any questions you have about the application or the location, and Mr. Ratzlaff is here to address any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff?
You indicated, Mr. Andrews, that you could administratively add more vendors.
If it is subject to your discretion, but that the recommended condition we have is that they start out with 12, and that if they have a need to expand beyond that, that you authorize. There's two ways to do that. One is to limit them to 12 and tell them if they want to have more that they come back to you, or the other option is to look at the site and say that 12 is a good start, but if they want to work with us to come up with a layout that adds more, that's what we've done at some of the other sites. So what that is doing is basically saying you think the site is suitable and that you're willing to delegate to staff to work with them to have a workable layout if they wish to have more than 12.
Any other questions? Mr. Ratzlaff, would you like to make comments or statement?
Only if you have any questions.
Questions for the applicant?
I'd be more than happy to answer any you have.
I don't know that we will, but hold on just a sec.
Mr.
No,
Ratzlaff,
I
just
think we've asked these questions.
Name and address like we do with everybody
Yeah,
else.
if you want to state your name and address, please.
Last name is Ratzlaff, John, 4325 East Humbarger Road, New Cambria.
Thank you.
So, John, I'm just curious, who is the property owner that you would come back to annually for permission?
Well, I don't even know the guy's manager's name. It was India. I don't know who actually owns the property.
It's the Salina Educational Co-op that owns the property.
Okay, and that includes the
And-
parking lot in front of it then as well as?
That is
I understand
correct.
Okay, that
And
was the only question I had.
Maybe Mr. Berger can help us with a name. Chris?
I was,
Yeah.
I don't have to know that. I was just focused on the entity that would be the controlling entity for that.
It's the Educational Co-op is the underlying landowner.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
No?
This is a public hearing. Are there members of the public that would like to speak? Sir? No? Excellent. We'll bring it back up here for discussion and action.
And we do want to, I guess, clarify for Mr. Ratzlaff that Ms. Brailsford is not the responsible party, that you will be the contact person. Okay. So in terms of our report, I think we indicated that the contact information we had India Brailsford, but the person will be our go-to person will be Mr. Ratzlaff.
Well, this seems consistent with a number of others that we've approved, so I would make a motion subject to the findings of fact as required 1 through 5, and including conditions items 1 through 8 as outlined by Dean, that we approve supplemental 16-2 as presented.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve application number SCP-16-2 with the required 5 findings as well as the 8 staff recommendations. Any discussion? No? All those in favor, vote aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Application supplemental 16-2 is approved.
We'll be sending you a letter summarizing today's action.
Thank you very much. Our next public hearing item is item number 3.2, which is a public hearing on the status of medical schools in the C4 Central Business District.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have attached to your report an administrative interpretation written and signed by myself that, had it been done at an earlier stage, would have foregone the need for having any action or advertised hearings. But since at staff's initiation you had set today as a public hearing date, it needed to be held. And we first brought this issue to your attention on May 3rd, after we became aware of more specific plans for a downtown medical school location. We put it on your formal agenda on the 17th to get additional feedback and guidance from you on a direction that a text amendment might take. What we failed to do at that time was have any discussions or dialogue with representatives of the medical school that we were in the matter discussing that with you. And so their expectation, based on prior communications and actions they had taken in reliance on that, was that their position was that their use was an already permitted use as a business school, similar to other business schools that had previously and historically located within the downtown area. And they wanted the zoning administrator, myself, to exercise the authority which the zoning ordinance had given to staff. And since that meeting we had on the 17th of May, I've had discussions with the architect on the project, and they stated their position and how they had taken steps in reliance on that position. So in order to take uncertainty out of the process and to allow the project to move forward with certainty, I have taken the step which I could have and should have done originally, which was to prepare an administrative interpretation at their request. So just by way of background, we have in each of our commercial districts kind of a catch-all provision that gives the zoning administrator the authority to approve uses that are not specifically listed if they are similar to or possess similar characteristics to a listed use. And in looking at precedent, I have found that a wide range of downtown schools have previously determined to be business schools, that the nature of the medical school being proposed is similar in characteristics to those uses, and limiting myself to the language that's currently in the ordinance, I determined that it would fall within the category of a business school. And so when we discussed that, there was some concern expressed by the Planning Commission that when there's a particularly new use or unanticipated use, that there would still be a role for the Planning Commission in determining the appropriateness of that use in a particular district. One that comes to mind most recently was vapor lounges, which were entirely new use that no one really knew about or understood, and required what we felt was public education. And that would be one where the zoning administrator would not feel comfortable saying vapor lounges are similar to any other existing use. But in this case, we jumped too quickly into the text amendment process without knowing about previous communications to the representatives of the project, and for that we apologize for consuming everyone's time in that matter. But the ordinance does make it my responsibility to make these administrative interpretations I skipped a step and jumped to the text amendment process without going through this process first. So our recommendation, we have opened the hearing. I have reported to you my conclusions and findings. The representatives of the project have reviewed my administrative interpretation and are in agreement with it, and felt that they did not have a need to attend today's meeting. So once we answer any questions you may have, the application will be closed out, and this will move forward. What we are suggesting, though, is, and we will look at other uses as well before we jump to that, but it is not particularly useful or helpful to have use categories in the ordinance, such as colleges and universities or business schools or schools for that matter, and not have a definition associated with that, because that puts a burden on the zoning administrator sometimes to make those determinations. And so when you have a term like schools, music, dance, business, and you have places like taekwondo academies and gymnastics schools and karate schools and Academy of Hair Design and Brown Mackey College, and you don't have a definition to line that up with, then you're putting the burden on the zoning administrator to make lots of interpretations, which need to be in writing and for the record. And in some of these cases, those prior interpretations are spotty at best. So what we can tell you is it's been my practice as the zoning administrator that when we have a situation like this, that it becomes an interpretation, that it is in writing, and that records of it are kept for posterity so people can look back and say, how did that happen? How did that use get there? So again, our recommendation would be that we have reported our conclusions to you. If there's any public comment or questions those should be received, and then the hearing should be closed, and this particular text amendment should be closed out.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff?
I do. I mean, I'm a little confused. First of all, why are we taking the zoning administrator's route on this? And not that I'm against it. I understand I don't have any problem with what you've done. But why are we taking the zoning administrator's route on this one? And we just heard an application for public hearing right now for an open air market, which we have them all over town in districts that are zoned similar to the one it's going in. Why didn't you just go ahead and approve that through the zoning administrator's options? The same thing would happen with another vapor lounge. If another vapor lounge wishes to come in downtown, you as the zoning administrator, then interpreting what you've done here, could just easily say, yeah, I mean, it's okay, and write your findings. Is that not correct?
It is correct that a vapor lounge is not an identified or listed use within the zoning ordinance. The difference between a vapor lounge is that is an entirely new use that didn't exist before, whereas a medical school is not a new use, and there's actually a medical school operating within the city of Salina. The difference was that in the case of locating that in the Braddock building, I was asked to make an interpretation that was zoned suitably. In this case, I was not asked to make that interpretation until after the planning staff had started the wheels forward on a text amendment. But as to this last item, what Mr. Ratzliff has is that we have the authority to approve a mobile merchant or seller, but for not more than 14 days. And so because these farmers markets are wanting to sell seasonally, or a place like Stutzman's, what the ordinance says is that the initial suitability of the location has to be determined by the Planning Commission at a public hearing where the neighbors are all notified. Because what was happening before is that we were having farmers markets and different open air markets set up. The neighbors, it was having spillover effects on neighbors, and so they said it would be an improvement if we got notified ahead of time of these proposed open air markets, and then we could register any comments or concerns that we had. Obviously, in this case, we sent out letters to everyone within 200 feet of this site, and no one had any concerns.
But where would other items paralleling this be? Let me ask another one, because I just want to see. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not making, but it seems to me, honestly, it seems to me like the hospital has a lot more power than some poor layman might, and so therefore they might get a preferential treatment. I hope that's not the case.
I
I
hope
trust
not
it's
either.
not. But anyway, what about daycare centers? We have approved daycare centers on this commission ever since I've been on, and they are similar in nature. They're allowed in residential areas. Why do we have every one of them come before us? Why can't you, just as the zoning administrator, look at those and say, hey, they meet the criteria, and approve them?
We're actually going to talk to you about that under other matters.
Okay, but that's one that could parallel
But
this, right?
here's the deal, and you can put yourself in my
No, I'm not. I don't want to get into
right.
what happened and all that.
What I'm
Just what's
trying
the
to
parallels?
say is that each of our commercial districts has a catch-all provision at the end, and my job is to have sufficient judgment and have my antenna up enough so that I can identify a use that might have concerns to abutting owners or the larger downtown community or something like that, and say, wait a minute, I am not going to administratively make a finding that a vapor lounge is just like A, B, or C. It's entirely new use. Vaping is an entirely new concept that most people don't understand. The federal regulations are just now catching up to it. The FAA just this year banned vaping on flights because nobody knew what vaping was. Nobody had any rules or regulations for it because it just appeared out of nowhere. So that would be an example where that's an entirely new use. And that would be one where we would say, you know, we need to have a public discussion and education about this and the appropriate locations of that. And
But now
other
that
uses
it's already
that,
downtown and been approved, now that vaping is an example you've chose to use. Now that vaping's downtown and it's already been approved, would you be able, as zoning administrator, just approve another one without
No.
coming here? No. Okay.
So I would take just a slightly different tack, but some of my thoughts are very much in sync with Commissioner Kennedy's. I'm looking at this application and I'm saying, okay, we looked at this. The health department, we had a text amendment proposed to make a medical school a permitted use in a C4 district, and I gathered from most of the discussion there that I don't think we had any problem with that. But a medical school is, to my mind, different than any usual other business school. It is, hello, a medical school. Therefore, it should have a specific permitted use, and the zoning administrator shouldn't be loaded with the task of saying, oh yeah, I think that's okay. I agree. That's for a commission to decide. And so what was the problem with that before?
And they were
So
here.
to complete my thought, and I'm also getting this vibe that some people have come in and said, you know, we're not subject to that. We are a business school. We say we're a business school, and you need to approve
Well,
us.
okay. And I asked in the beginning if this was a business school, and I was told it wasn't. Because I said, isn't this like Hayes Hair Academy? And as I read this, it says it's just like Hayes Hair Academy. But this is a public hearing, so before the discussion,
Yeah.
let's ask if there's public that wants to speak
Yes,
on
please.
this. Are you here to speak on this, sir? No. Then we'll close the public hearing. a little discussion, and then let's get on to how we can
Mis-
get this down better in the future.
Mr. Hers would like to respond to one of Mr. Kennedy's questions.
Well, I think David had a legitimate question first, though, go ahead.
No, I've said my piece.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think when we're looking at analogous situations, something that's a little bit different about this, and is really the operative portion or piece of the puzzle, is that we have.
Is your microphone on?
No, I'm on. Okay. Is that in this particular situation, we didn't have a well-defined definition of what a medical use is and fitting it into the existing constraints of the C4 district. The other examples that we've talked about, such as the special use permit that we just heard for farmers market, or the conditional use permits that we use for vaping lounges now, or tattoo parlors, or daycare homes, are items that have specifically prescribed processes within the ordinance. And so there, it's very clear and cut and dry who has what authority and the proper processes that we have to go through. The ordinance recognizes that it can't catch every single use, and therefore relies on the interpretation of the zoning administrator to figure out when you have those strange anomalies or things that are not specifically defined in the words, how they're going to fit in and where they're going to fit in. And I think what Dean was mentioning in his presentation is that right now we've made this interpretation, or he has made this interpretation. However, it would be helpful to identify definitions of those various uses in case there is disagreement on if a hair salon is different from a music business, education facility, or a medical school.
Thank you.
So to respond to that, I guess I'll ask this in a question. If we had hearing Z16 for last time, and we were considering this amendment to add medical schools to the list and permitted uses in the C4 district, those items, what we're talking about is adding it as a permitted use. Why, if we went ahead and just said we're adding it as a permitted use, it seems to me a medical school is pretty clear, doesn't need any definition. We did talk a little bit about chiropractic, et cetera, but at least in my mind, I don't think I have a problem with chiropractic medical schools as compared to something else. I'm okay with something that says a medical school is a permitted use. And that seems to me much more clear than having an administrative interpretation that works around hair salons and dance schools, et cetera. You need a separate category in my mind.
Yeah, and I think you sort of mentioned, I guess it wasn't a question, but you sort of mentioned, we seemed to work through this last time and had got approval for it, and then all of a sudden did it have to come back as a problem? It appeared to come back as a problem.
Right.
And so somebody made it a problem
The
somewhere along the
issue-
way. Apparently the hospital made it a problem.
The issue for planning staff is that we understood this to be conceptual. And what we have learned, and that you've had a series of these come before you that we have made reference to the Salina 2020 project, and you had an item added to your agenda last meeting dealing with the Star Bond projects and the TIF district. And the fact of the matter is that things that are happening related to the Star Bonds and the TIF district and all those things are happening faster than planning staff and our planning processes can keep up with. So something that we thought was conceptual is actually real and has gone beyond the conceptual stage. And so when we thought we were dealing with a conceptual question, that was the approach, but that creates any text amendment process. A, takes time, and B, has uncertainty. And back in April, the question was posed about whether this could be done through an administrative interpretation or through a text amendment. and it could be done through either approach. But to get certainty into the equation to allow other steps to move forward, I have done this administrative interpretation to create certainty.
So what obstacles would a text amendment revision put in the way of the medical school now?
It would be timing, and it would be uncertainty as to outcome.
Because the city commission might not approve it?
I can't answer that question. I can only answer the question that an administrative interpretation is something that I could have done and should have done much earlier. And if it had been a different result, the error that I was making was that I was looking at how other communities were regulating these uses, and that is not what the ordinance directs me to do. The ordinance directs me to look at our existing language and to look at similar uses that had been approved. And I will say that one of the things that was decisive is that this particular medical school will not do any clinical or patient care. And that makes it somewhat unique because many medical schools do. This one will not. So that makes it purely a school and not any kind of medical facility. So based on the broad definition that's been given to school in the downtown area, I felt that that was the correct approach.
So I want to be, just to follow up real quickly so that I'm clear about where I'm coming from on this. I have no problem with medical school being there, and as per our previous conversation, I think that's okay. And I don't want to gum up the works or make it difficult for that to happen, but I do have a problem with the way this has transpired. And no matter whose fault it is, it seems like...
If you have a problem with the way it's transpired, then your problem should be with the zoning administrator and not with anyone else.
I tend to look more charitably on the zoning administrator.
Thank you.
I'm
I have to say, okay, I appreciate the fact that the staff was proactive and that visionary and conceptual, and that's how planning happens.
That's right.
So I appreciate all that, and I put complete faith in the zoning administrator to make the correct decision, and I'm sure in this particular case the correct decision was made. That being said, my first issue with this was that there was no definition of medical school, which I raised several times, and whether or not that was a business, and it was said that it was not a business. So it is a business now. So I think it's been put to rest. If we want to talk about how to work on this subject in the future, we need to do that in the next agenda item.
Well, I'm not convinced it's been put to rest, and you can put me out of order whenever you want.
You may
But I'm gonna
state your case.
First of all, Dean, you don't need to apologize to me or, in my opinion, to this committee. But what this makes me feel like, you don't even need to respond to this because this is purely my opinion. But what this feels like to me, that if I'm big enough and powerful enough in this city, and I can talk to the right people, I can move something through the process much faster. Because there was no holdup with it in Planning Commission to begin with. We gave it a 100% recommendation, I think. But somehow, somewhere along the way, someone said, oh, this is not fast enough for me, so I want to move it through quicker, or I've got my feelings hurt that I had to go before Planning Commission, and I don't feel like I have to. I don't know all that. That's all. Maybe that didn't happen, but it's what it feels like to me. It feels like to me some things were happening behind the scenes, which I don't like in government to begin with. I think it should be transparent, but some things happened because of the power of the hospital or the size of the foundation or whatever. They moved this through more quickly. Now, that's okay if that's okay for average citizen every time to do the same thing. So if I want to do some small project and I'm just one person in this town with no money and no power, I need to be able to move my project through just as fast as they did. And that's the only thing I need to say. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the only thing I will note is that the owner-operator of the karate school that's across the street in the C4 district received the same benefit of an administrative interpretation, that their karate school was similar. You might not agree with that, but I said it's similar in characteristics to a dance school, which is not ideal, but that the karate school is similar enough in that it is permitted. So it is something that we are faced with on a regular basis, and I am in full agreement that definitions are needed, and we talked about things that a medical school needs to have a broad definition. It needs to include home remedies. It needs to include osteopaths, chiropractic, all those things needs to be included in that. But when we think about it, we don't have a definition in our zoning ordinance of what a school is. And you can say, well, it's pretty obvious what a school is, but it's still a term that ought to be defined, and colleges and universities ought to be defined, and business school ought to be defined, and medical school ought to be defined. But the focus here is on uses. And I guess the most significant thing here in terms of timing was that this administrative interpretation could have and should have been done first before I ever brought the matter to you. It's just that planning staff thought we were dealing with a concept, and in reality, it is part of the Star Bonds project, and there's a location selected and all those things, and that is just something that planning staff is having to adjust to, that things related to the Salina 2020 project are moving at a rapid pace, and we are often one step behind.
So one quick comment, both philosophically and practically, about the chairman's discussion and previous discussion on the commission about whether medical school is a business or it's about providing a service. And it seems if we accept this philosophically, what we're saying is that it is a business. It is first and foremost a money-making proposition. Well, I think that's probably true. Sadly, probably true.
It's been proven true.
Yeah. So,
It's been proven true.
Well,
right,
what the
that-
zoning administrator is saying is it is first and foremost a
Yeah.
school. And we are also saying that the Academy of Hair Design is first and foremost a school.
And this is what troubles me, because I would think you would want to elevate your status from business to something of merit. So rather than force the point to be just the opposite.
Yeah.
But it works for me.
And no press is here, but they can probably check the videotape if they'd like to
I
later.
checked
for
the
any
minutes.
comments. Right.
So we will consider Z16-4 closed out, and we will update you. And what I wanted to state in that is that when we have situations like that, what we have said with our other boards is if we are making interpretations such as this, they will be in writing, and they will also be reported to the commission. This is not, if someone comes to town and they come to a development review team meeting and I make an administrative interpretation, I also wanted to state that in writing, I made an administrative interpretation that the Salina Fieldhouse project is a YMCA type facility, and that is a permitted use in the C4 district. So there wasn't, it is virtually identical to a YMCA facility, except it's not operated solely by the Y. So those are the types of things that we are making administrative interpretations on. And we've got a whole bunch of attorneys and lenders and everybody else looking at the Salina Fieldhouse project who have accepted my administrative interpretation that is a permitted C4 use. So,
And should.
Now, where is that officially recorded?
it is recorded in the office of the zoning administrator. We have both an electronic file and a notebook where those administrative interpretations are made and indexed.
Should we be advised of that, any of those actions? Can you do that?
That is what I am stating, is that they are to be put to writing, and then what I'm saying, that if I'm looking at the C5 district or the C4 district, and there's a use that I approve under the catch-all provision, that I would need to report that back to you, so you can tell me I shouldn't have done that you would have preferred that there be public discussion on that.
So this item's been withdrawn?
This item is closed out and withdrawn with no further action, and we are ready to advance to other matters. And Mr. Hers, what's that? The target. We have a administrative matter that we just need to get a sense of the commission on a sign request out at the Target store on Marketplace.
And before we advance that item, I want to express my appreciation to staff for their work on this previous matter.
So what we have for you is that the Target store is in a planned commercial district, and it is a case where site plans for development in our planned commercial districts are reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission, and this was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission.
As Mr. Andrews stated, the Target property is part of a planned district, and when it was originally developed, it was approved with what we would call an off-site pylon sign along 9th Street. So here's an aerial photo where you have the Target building and then their parking lot. And if you drive by 9th Street, you'll see a Target sign that's not on their property, but yet on the property to the west of them. In 2005, they came forward to the Planning Commission and requested an amendment to their approved plan to add, in addition to the pylon sign, a monument sign at the corner of Marketplace and Schilling. So we jumped around there. Yep, there we go, John. So it's hard to see, but it's the highlighted yellow sign at the corner here that you see. Well, recently, a sign contractor on behalf of Target has come to staff and requested that a monument sign be approved on the west side of the entrance off of Schilling Road. Now, the 2005 monument sign never was constructed, but was the approved location for a monument sign on this property. And what they're wanting to do is have that sign relocated to a position here. If you can go to our slide that says Target elevation drawings and location, John. This is hard to see, but they're showing that transition, that relocation here. And I don't know if is there any way to zoom in on this area? Here's the mock-up artwork showing the monument sign, and there's a stop sign and a light pole in a landscape island just to the east of here, and so where they're proposing to put the sign or relocate the sign is actually in a parking stall. And that's fine because they do have surplus parking. What we would recommend that if you do decide to approve the location of the monument sign, that landscape island be extended around the sign so that it's protected and looks more uniform with what you would expect to see in a development like this. So with that, we do have a few alternatives that we've identified for you. One is that the proposed monument sign be approved in lieu or in place of the 2005 monument sign. So it's basically a relocation from the Marketplace corner to the proposed location. That would be option one. Option two would be that we would have that you would allow the new monument sign in addition to the 2005 location if they ever wanted to bring that forth and erect that sign, as well as the existing pylon sign. And the last option that we identified would be that you would just allow the existing pylon sign with no monument signs. But we would recommend option one, which would be a relocation of the approved 2005 site plan to allow the location of a monument sign on their Schilling entrance.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
Does the sign meet all the normal criteria as far as that type of sign goes, other than
Yes.
the location? Thank you.
Yes.
It would seem to me, though, that that would block some vision, traffic vision.
It would be set back, if we can go to the what we call the site plan, John. It's really hard to see. If we can zoom in on this area, there are some dimensions listed on that plan in that location. Okay. So what we have is the proposed sign, and then the setback area is actually 14 feet from the property line, and then you also have a number of feet from the property line to the curb. So it's set back quite a ways. I can't quite make out that. Is that a dimension there, or is that a utility line?
That's just labeling the utility line.
Okay. I think most people are gonna pull up here, whereabouts, where they'll be in front of the sign when they're pulling through, so we won't have any vision triangle issues.
But it would also seem, though, that it would be advantageous for a pylon sign with, there would be no question of any site triangle conflict, and I would think Target would prefer that anyway.
Well, right now, their preference is the monument sign.
Is that right?
That's what they're proposing.
Am I getting right that the pylon sign advertises several businesses, or is it just, or is the pylon sign just for, the existing pylon sign just for Target?
The existing pylon sign is for Target.
Okay, and that's the one on 9th Street.
That's in 19. It's an
Gotcha.
off-street. It's what
Yeah.
we would call an advertising sign
Not
because
real.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
time, they were only going to have a sign on their own property, and then they made an arrangement to have this off-premise sign, which they thought was more advantageous for 9th Street. So what the Planning Commission has done through the planned commercial districts is, while a straight commercial district limits signs by square footage, the Planning Commission has essentially adopted a practice where each of these outlots is allowed to have a single freestanding sign. And so this was the freestanding sign for Target. In 2005, they requested a second sign, which the Planning Commission approved at Marketplace. They never installed that, and now they're proposing a sign, but at their Schilling Road East entrance. If you could go back to that site plan, John. I just wanted the actual stop bar for vehicles exiting this site is right here. And so you can see that the sign is well behind that. So when we measure the vision clearance triangle, we're actually measuring out into this, whether there's an obstruction in this area, and this sign is actually behind the vision where we would even measure for that. So if it was closer to the property line, it might be a question, but this is actually behind where vehicle stop bar is, so it's not in a line of sight for vehicles that would be exiting out onto Schilling Road.
Dean, could John go back to that previous slide that we had? Would you mind?
The photograph?
Yeah, of the pylon sign. You know, sometimes I think we live around here so long, we forget how many poles are in this town. But look at that. Isn't that amazing? I mean, think of a visitor coming to town and you look down that streetscape there and you think, wow, that's not a very nice appearance, is it?
No, it's not very nice. That's right.
As well as poles.
Oh, transformer poles, and I know the transformer station was there logically along. But look at the number of poles even behind the cedars. I mean, it's basically not a very attractive view.
And this is a recent photo, John? The,
Probably more poles 'cause they put up
what
some.
you have seen Westar do is that high voltage line along Belmont, and then it goes to the east through Golden Eagle Estates and all. They have gone through and replaced these kind of trellis towers with something that is just a single clean support, and I don't know if they have gotten to that out here, but this has been a challenge when we have the property on the other side of Schilling Road that has this line running through it. We've got an island in the Sam's Club parking lot where we're trying to accommodate these towers, so it is less than ideal. But you are correct that the amount of stuff that's out there almost makes it a challenge to see that sign.
Yeah, that was on
You know,
point.
I don't recall seeing that target sign there.
Well,
I know, I don't either, but, well, I do once I see it.
Well, then it would never direct you into
yes,
Target.
and obviously
So,
it's not.
It
it's
makes
not
sense
very
they want
effective.
something where you actually turn
Yeah,
into
right,
the
right.
street.
Right, right.
So
I
that was again that was
But-
their original plan was to have the sign on their marketplace frontage. Whether it was their corporate office or other advisors said no, it needs to get moved out to 9th Street. I would agree that it is very difficult to pick out when you're driving out there, and I think most people know where Target is because the big bullseye on the store. But
So you need action on this? Is that what you need?
yes,
Okay.
you would look at the different options that Mr. Hers has provided for you, and I think option one, isn't that your preferred option, Dustin?
Yeah,
That's what I
option
said.
one, and I didn't write in the conditions, but a condition that we would recommend in addition to option one would be that area around the sign be incorporated into the existing landscaping.
Right.
The landscaping island would be expanded to surround that new sign.
Yeah.
Have you mentioned that to them yet,
Yes, we've had conversations with the sign contractor on that.
about the landscaping?
And-
Because there'd be
No,
some cost.
sorry, we've been working with a
Okay.
sign
Because there's some
contractor.
cost to that. And
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would move that we approve application Z92-8B, Planning Commission Alternative Number 1, with the staff recommendation below, but incorporating within it language to include that sign within an expanded land island that already exists at that location.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve application Z92-8B. I'm sorry, where are we at here? I'm sorry, David, would you-
Number one as recommended by
Number-
staff.
Recommendation number 1.
As
and I
recommended by
can-
staff
Yeah.
with the addition, because the landscaping isn't on this, right?
Right, but staff recommendation at the bottom is that it's included to one freestanding monument sign. My wording would be contained within an expanded land island, but I'm not trying to dictate the language.
Yeah.
It's just that idea should be.
What we're trying to explain is
staff.
that this is in lieu of and not in addition to the sign at Marketplace, that this is an alternate location, not an additional sign.
Right.
And we're approving all that. We're just adding the fact that the landscape
Right.
island will be
And
extended to include that sign.
if you drive down South 9th Street and you see a new sign that was put up for Brown Shoe Fit, the same thing was done there. We didn't want the sign sitting in the middle of a parking stall. We wanted an island to protect it, so that is what they did there.
Okay. Then, it's been moved and seconded to approve application number Z92-8B with the staff recommendations as well as extending the landscaping island around the sign. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
I'm
carries.
gonna hand out that Lexi Law thing. The other matter that we have is just what we have here is that one of the questions that Mr. Hers and I have had is why have we had so many group daycare homes come before the commission here in the last year or so? And we found out that the answer is at least partially the effects of Lexi's Law, which was passed by the Kansas legislature. And what Lexi's Law did was it essentially eliminated registered daycare from the city of Salina. In the past, we had registered daycares, we had licensed daycares, and then we had group daycare homes. And a registered daycare was essentially not really subject to any inspections or any licensing requirements. And at the time, a majority of daycares in Salina were in the registered category, where essentially those either closed voluntarily or they transitioned to a licensed. The other thing that they did was that they changed the ratios for the age groups, and they put a lot of daycare providers into a situation where they weren't really having care for 12 children, but because of the age groups and ratios they had, they were required to have an additional outside provider. So what we have is that we have home occupation regulations that allow you to do a barber shop or beauty shop in your home. Those are approved administratively. Licensed daycare is approved administratively. But if you have a business in your home, you're not allowed to have any outside employees. And since the group daycare category is the one home-based business that has an outside person or helper or employee, that was done through a conditional use process because it didn't fit the home occupation definition. What we came across was that the City of Manhattan planning staff was having a similar phenomena and could not figure it out, so they met with their health department and discussed the changes in the ratio. And what they did was essentially they amended their home occupation regulations and their definitions of daycare. And so what they did is they still prohibited outside employees in home occupations except for daycare homes. So what they did is they are now in a situation where, as ordinance, they have allowed the planning staff to administratively approve the group daycares with one outside helper. And essentially they have, if you're 12 or below, you're permitted. If you're above 12, then you are in the conditional use category, the group daycare center category. So what we found was that we kept having people come to us and saying that they wanted to move into the group daycare home category, but they weren't actually ever going to have 12 children there that they were caring for, and they weren't moving into that category to have 12 children. They were moving into that category so they could have a helper because of the age distribution. And some of that is a function of all-day kindergarten, where it used to be that they would provide care for a kindergartner half the day, but now with all-day kindergarten, they're not. So then they're having younger children, and by having younger children, they're having a helper. And so we just wanted to bring that to your attention, that that's something that we can put into a report and share with you and give you some background on what the City of Manhattan chose to do. But they essentially chose to not to try to eliminate the need for those daycare homes to have to get a conditional use permit, and that is something that we can explore with you in more detail.
So if that kind of change is made, Dean, is that just a function of the city commission, or is it the planning commission that needs to approve it as well?
Well, it would start, we would give you a background report. We would start by seeing if you wanted to initiate a text amendment to the home occupation regulations. And so Let's see if I read this correctly. It says, and Manhattan's zoning ordinance is almost identical to ours in many cases, but in their home occupation regulations state that no person shall be employed by the home occupation unless they reside in the dwelling unit, with the exception of one additional employee for a daycare home who does not reside in the dwelling unit. And so they added that exception language that allowed daycare homes to stay in the home occupation category and have an outside helper. So the reason that we are bringing the cases to you and that we're having the hearing on that is that these are daycares that are out adding an outside helper. And so we can put that together for you for a little more in-depth discussion, but we wanted to bring that to your attention is that part of the driving force of changes in daycare is Lexi's Law, which essentially eliminated registered daycare from the state of Kansas. So now anyone who provides daycare must be licensed.
Thank you.
You need a consensus from us to move forward. Is that what you need?
Yeah, we would bring you more of a report and put that on for that you have a report and some examples in front of you to discuss it. But we wanted you all to have a copy of information on Lexi's Law so you could see what some of the changes were in the daycare. And we honestly didn't understand ourselves why we were having the influx of people come to talk to us about group daycare homes.
So we have a consensus? Excellent. We'll hear more about that later then.
As to the meeting on the 19th, we have no agenda items scheduled. We can either skip the meeting entirely or have a study session only of your choosing if there's a topic you would like to go explore. On the 2nd of August, we anticipate coming back. There have been study sessions, a number of meetings with the development community, and some possible adjustments to our fair share road funding mechanism. And so we have blocked out August 2nd for that, so you should make note of that. And then we have an application for an expansion of the Kansas Wesleyan Maintenance Facility that is on South 9th Street that would also be on that agenda. But they did just build it, but now they're expanding it. So
Any
I-
feelings about the next meeting?
I know that I will not be present
I
on the
think it's
19th.
time for a little break.
I'm gone also, so
Yeah.
I'd vote for a break.
I agree.
Mr. Hers won't be here, so there's
Yeah.
no point me.
I haven't been
Well,
gone
then,
forever.
that's all, that's all
Should've
for
said that
that.
at the beginning.
I could plan one Tuesday to be actually not here.
So what we would suggest is take the 19th off your calendar, but please circle August 2nd because we will be talking about fair share road funding some more.
Thank you. Anything else?
I have one item. Just a question, but it seems to me like a few years back we talked about, and I don't even remember the exact location, but about truck parking, overflow truck parking up on North 9th behind Freightliner in a lot that's open back there.
Yes.
And I thought we rejected that concept until some things were done, such as a paved road, paving into the.
Yes, that
But
was
I drove
for
by the other day, and I'll swear I saw a number of what appears to be overflow trucks and trailers parked back there.
that is for Palmer Truck and Trailer. The application that was before us was for the towing company impound yard, and that was turned down for those reasons that you described: lack of utilities, lack of infrastructure. But Mr. Palmer has, we were assured by the property owner that Mr. Palmer was going to have to find a new home for those trailers, but that has not occurred, so that is a zoning enforcement item
Okay.
for staff to address.
So we'll see
It's-
the diesel smoke coming out of those tractors pretty quick as they fire up to pull out of there, right?
Well, yeah, it's all trailers and no cabs, but
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They'll be hitching you up. Anything else?
I have a question about, you talked about tow trucks. Are tow trucks allowed to be parked on residential streets?
not overnight, no. Not in a residentially zoned area. We find different levels of, that is a provision that is enforced by the police department in terms of on-street parking, but we have had different situations where if you are parked on the street and the property that you are parked next to is zone commercial or industrial, then the vehicle can be parked there. But if you are overnight parking in a residential zone, then you cannot park a commercial vehicle on the street overnight in a residential zone.
Are there other matters? If not, we're adjourned.
So, David, I heard